The final months of the war in Europe were unlike anything the world had seen before. Cities were crumbling under relentless bombardment, and entire landscapes had been transformed into battlefields, where survival was no longer guaranteed. Amidst this chaos, soldiers on both sides faced impossible odds. Yet, in the midst of destruction, there were stories that seemed almost surreal tales of courage, ingenuity, and sheer determination. One such story comes from the Eastern Front, where the remnants of the German army were desperately holding back the advancing Soviet forces. And at the center of this tale was not a seasoned tank commander, nor a decorated officer, but a man who had spent most of his life in classrooms rather than battlefields, a German schoolteacher named Heinrich Müller. Heinrich was not a soldier by training. Before the war, he had taught mathematics and physics at a small school in Bavaria, guiding children through lessons in algebra and mechanics. When the war had reached its final stage, and Germany's need for manpower became critical, Heinrich was conscripted into the army. At first, he served in a support role, far from the front lines, helping maintain equipment and supplies. But as the Soviet offensive pushed ever closer to Berlin, all hands were required at the front. Heinrich found himself assigned to a tank unit, not for his combat experience, but for his technical skills. It was a strange twist of fate, a man used to chalkboards and textbooks, now facing machines of war, metal beasts capable of crushing anything in their path. The Tiger tank, a formidable weapon of the German army, was both a symbol of strength and a logistical nightmare. Its massive armor and powerful 88mm gun made it nearly unstoppable in open combat, yet it was prone to breakdowns and required constant maintenance. For a teacher like Heinrich, who had only ever dealt with theoretical mechanics, the task of understanding this engineering marvel in the places, middle of a war zone, was daunting, and yet he would soon face a situation that would demand every ounce of ingenuity, patience and courage he possessed. It was late April 1945. The war was in its dying days, but the fighting had become increasingly ferocious. The German army was fragmented, with units cut off, supplies dwindling, and morale collapsing. Heinrich's unit had been assigned to defend a strategic town along the Oder River, one of the last barriers before the Soviet advance into Berlin. The town itself had been reduced to rubble, buildings gutted, streets littered with debris, and smoke rising from fires that refused to die. The atmosphere was tense, every corner a potential ambush, every moment filled with uncertainty. In the midst of this, Heinrich's unit received word that a Tiger tank, one of their most valuable assets, had been immobilised during a failed counterattack. The tank, known as Tiger 321, had been hit by Soviet artillery. Its tracks were shattered, its engine dead, and it sat stranded in the middle of the battlefield, a sitting target. For the soldiers, the idea of recovering the tank seemed impossible. The front was collapsing, the enemy was closing in, and the equipment needed to tow or repair such a massive vehicle was nowhere to be found. Many argued that abandoning it was the only viable option. Yet, Heinrich saw something different. He didn't see a lost cause. He saw a problem to solve. With the instinct of a teacher and the mind of a mechanic, he volunteered to attempt the repair. It was a decision that would place him directly in harm's way, with no guarantee of success. But it was also a decision that would test the limits of human ingenuity under extreme conditions. The day Heinrich approached the damaged Tiger was a day etched in memory for the men of his unit. The sky was overcast, with a thin drizzle falling that made the streets slick with mud and debris. The tank itself was a hulking silhouette against the ruined townscape, its armor pockmarked with shrapnel and holes, smoke curling from the damaged engine compartment. The soldiers watched as Heinrich, carrying only a small toolkit, climbed onto the tank with a determination that seemed almost otherworldly. He moved with precision, examining the twisted tracks, the bent suspension, and the cracked engine casing. Every movement, every decision, had to be calculated. One wrong step, and the tank or the man could become a deadly trap. Yet, Heinrich remained focused, his mind working like a machine, untangling the complex puzzle before him. The tools he carried were rudimentary compared to the damage he faced. Wrenches, hammers, improvised levers, these were instruments designed for small-scale repairs, not for restoring a 57-ton war machine in the middle of a battlefield. But Heinrich's knowledge of mechanics, combined with his methodical approach to problem-solving, allowed him to assess what could be fixed immediately and what could be jury-rigged to get the tank moving. His approach was almost surgical. He prioritized the track first, the tank's lifeline. Without functional tracks, the Tiger was dead weight. He and a few willing soldiers began the painstaking process of removing twisted metal, realigning suspension components, and replacing damaged wheels. It was back-breaking work, made worse by the threat of artillery fire, the constant rumble of distant explosions, and the knowledge that every minute spent on the tank was a minute closer to the enemy breaking through. As the hours passed, the danger grew. Soviet patrols were reportedly nearby, and the sound of artillery grew louder, echoing through the empty streets. Yet Heinrich's calm demeanor had a strange effect on the soldiers. His focus was contagious, and even the most battle-hardened men found themselves drawn into his meticulous rhythm. They handed him tools, reinforced sections of track, and improvised solutions based on his instructions. The classroom discipline that had once kept rows of students in line now guided a group of soldiers in the desperate task of bringing a massive war machine back to life. By late afternoon, a remarkable transformation had taken place. The damaged Tiger, once an immobile wreck, now sat on repaired tracks, its engine patched enough to start. Smoke still rose from the exhaust, and the armor bore the scars of combat, but the tank was, against all odds, operational. The first tentative turn of its massive wheels sent a shiver of relief and awe through the unit. Heinrich, the schoolteacher who had never fired a gun in anger, had accomplished what many thought impossible. The Tiger could move again, and with it, the unit had regained a critical asset for the final defense of the town. The story of Heinrich Müller repairing the Tiger tank is more than just a tale of mechanical skill. It is a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the strange ways that ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges in times of war. It also reminds us that heroism does not always come in the form of bravery under fire. Sometimes it comes in the quiet, determined work of saving what seems lost, of restoring function where chaos reigns. In the next phase of the story, we will follow the Tiger as it returns to the battlefield, witness the challenges it faced in the final days of the war, and uncover some of the lesser-known facts about this remarkable tank and the man who repaired it. What Heinrich accomplished that day would echo far beyond the rubble-strewn streets, leaving a story that continues to capture the imagination of historians, tank enthusiasts, and anyone who marvels at the intersection of intellect and courage in the most unlikely circumstances. With the Tiger tank now mobile again, the tension in the ruined town grew even thicker. The enemy was closing in, their artillery pounding relentlessly, and yet the repaired tank moved like a ghost among the rubble, its tracks grinding over shattered cobblestones and twisted metal. Heinrich Müller, the unassuming schoolteacher, remained at the heart of this mechanical miracle, climbing in and out of the turret with the same methodical precision he had displayed all day. To anyone watching, it was hard to believe that a man accustomed to chalkboards and classrooms was now orchestrating the survival of a 57-ton steel behemoth in the middle of one of the war's final, most chaotic battles. The task ahead was far from over. The repairs had been made under extreme improvisation. The suspension was partially jury-rigged, the engine patched with whatever materials could be scavenged, and some of the track links had been welded in place rather than properly replaced. Every mile the tank moved was a risk, yet Heinrich had devised clever solutions to compensate. He had fashioned makeshift braces to keep the damaged turret aligned, and used ropes and pulleys to support sections of the hull weakened by artillery fire. Each modification was crude by peacetime standards, but it was enough to restore functionality, and in war, functionality was all that mattered. As night fell, the tank's presence began to make a difference. German infantry, exhausted and demoralized, took heart from seeing the Tiger rumble through the streets, its massive gun turret swiveling, its engine growling. For them, it was more than a machine, it was a symbol of hope, and for Heinrich, it was validation of a strange and dangerous gamble. He had trusted his knowledge, his instincts, and his ability to improvise, and for the moment, it had paid off. The next morning brought new challenges. Soviet forces had intensified their assault, launching coordinated attacks aimed at encircling the town and neutralizing any remaining German resistance. Tanks, artillery, and infantry moved relentlessly, but Heinrich's Tiger was no longer just a defensive tool. It had become a centerpiece of counteraction. Using the patched engine and repaired tracks, the tank could maneuver into strategic positions, blocking streets, supporting infantry, and even engaging enemy vehicles when necessary. Heinrich himself took on a dual role, serving both as mechanic and operator, coordinating the tank's movements with uncanny precision. One of the most remarkable aspects of the story was Heinrich's ability to innovate under pressure. At one point, the Tiger's main gun jammed during an exchange with advancing Soviet armor. Rather than panic or abandon the tank, Heinrich dismantled the breach using improvised tools, freeing the gun in the middle of a combat zone. He even constructed a rudimentary targeting adjustment system using the tank's optics and a simple set of plumb lines, allowing the crew to fire more accurately, despite the damage the tank had sustained. It was a combination of technical knowledge, ingenuity, and nerves of steel that most combat veterans would have found extraordinary. While the tank proved operational, the realities of the battlefield continued to weigh heavily. Supplies were limited, fuel and ammunition were scarce. Every time the Tiger fired or moved, it risked mechanical failure. Every scratch in the armor could mean a fatal hit. Yet Heinrich and his small crew persevered, treating the tank as a fragile yet vital weapon. In many ways, it became a microcosm of the larger German struggle in those final days. Resourceful, desperate, and teetering on the edge of collapse. The soldiers around Heinrich often remarked on his calm demeanor. While artillery shells fell nearby, and the distant rumble of tanks and gunfire filled the air, he maintained a focus that seemed almost otherworldly. He had a way of breaking down complex mechanical problems into simple steps, explaining them to the crew in ways that even those with no technical experience could follow. In this, his background as a teacher proved invaluable. He could translate the chaos of war into actionable solutions, turning panic into methodical action. This rare combination of intellect and composure inspired those around him and allowed the Tiger to continue functioning despite its precarious state. As the unit pushed the Tiger into defensive positions, Heinrich discovered another problem. The tank's cooling system was damaged, and the engine risked overheating with continuous use. Supplies to replace radiator components were non-existent. Using his knowledge of thermodynamics and physics, Heinrich devised a makeshift cooling system by rerouting water and using metal scraps to dissipate heat more effectively. It was crude, but it worked. The engine ran longer, and the tank remained mobile when others would have been abandoned as a burnt-out wreck. This level of improvisation, born from a teacher's mind and honed under the pressures of war, was unheard of in the chaotic last days of the conflict. In addition to mechanical ingenuity, Heinrich's story also reveals fascinating aspects of the Tiger itself. The tank, though powerful, was notoriously difficult to repair. Its sheer size and complexity required a team of skilled mechanics, specialized tools, and a stable workshop, all luxuries Heinrich could not afford in a war-torn town. Yet, his combination of theoretical knowledge and practical ingenuity allowed him to compensate for missing parts, broken equipment, and constant threats from the advancing enemy. The repairs he performed highlight both the vulnerability and resilience of one of the most iconic weapons of the Second World War. During the days that followed, the Tiger engaged in several skirmishes, often tipping the balance in favor of Heinrich's unit. Soviet soldiers, aware of the danger posed by such a tank, focused fire on it whenever possible, but the makeshift repairs held up. Crews would later recall that the tank seemed to have almost supernatural resilience, moving when other vehicles were immobilized, returning fire when all seemed lost. Heinrich's meticulous attention to detail, from reinforcing critical components to managing engine performance, had turned what many considered a lost cause into a functioning instrument of war. But Heinrich's contributions extended beyond mechanical repairs. His leadership and problem-solving skills helped his unit survive in ways that conventional strategy could not. Soldiers learned to improvise alongside him, creating ad hoc solutions for supply shortages and tactical setbacks. They witnessed firsthand the power of ingenuity and adaptability in conditions where conventional methods had failed. The story of the schoolteacher repairing a Tiger tank was not just a tale of machinery. It was a testament to the human capacity to rise above circumstance, to innovate under pressure, and to find courage in the most unlikely forms. By the time the Soviet offensive reached the outskirts of the town, Heinrich's Tiger had become central to the defense. It moved with precision through rubble-strewn streets, supporting infantry, and even repelling smaller Soviet tanks. Each day it survived was a small victory, a testament to the extraordinary effort that had gone into its repair. And while the larger war was nearing its inevitable conclusion, within this town, for this unit, Heinrich had created a story of hope and perseverance, born not from military training or combat experience, but from intellect, courage, and a relentless drive to solve problems no matter the odds. As observers recount the events, it becomes clear that this was a story that could only exist in the final, desperate days of the war. A man whose life had revolved around teaching and numbers now stood at the center of one of the most remarkable acts of battlefield improvisation in history. The Tiger tank, once immobilized and abandoned, now moved again, a symbol of resilience, intellect, and determination. Every bolt tightened, every improvised brace, every calculated maneuver was a mark of Heinrich's extraordinary capability and resolve. In the next and final segment, we will follow the climactic moments as the repaired Tiger faces its greatest test, the dangers intensify, and we witness the extraordinary final outcome of Heinrich Müller's incredible ingenuity. The story moves toward its conclusion, where courage and cleverness confront the harshest realities of war, leaving behind a legacy that has fascinated historians and tank enthusiasts for decades. The final days of April 1945 were a blur of fire, smoke, and chaos. The town was almost unrecognizable, reduced to rubble by relentless bombardment, its streets littered with the remnants of homes, vehicles, and shattered lives. Yet, amidst this devastation, Heinrich Müller's repaired Tiger tank rumbled forward, an improbable monument of human ingenuity, navigating a world that seemed determined to tear itself apart. Each turn of its massive treads echoed through the empty streets like a heartbeat, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, resourcefulness and determination could create ripples of hope. By this point, Heinrich and his crew had formed a rhythm, a synergy born of necessity. The tank was no longer just metal and machinery. It had become a lifeline. The Soviet advance intensified, and reports indicated that larger armored units were moving into position to encircle the town. The repaired Tiger now faced its most dangerous mission yet, a direct confrontation with multiple Soviet tanks, infantry, and artillery positions concentrated on what remained of the German defences. Every movement had to be calculated, every shot deliberate, and yet there was an underlying tension. Mechanical failures could occur at any moment, and the Tiger, for all its size and strength, was still operating on patches, makeshift parts, and human ingenuity. The first encounter came as dawn broke over the ruined town. Soviet T-34 emerged from behind the skeletal remains of buildings, their silhouettes moving with deadly precision. Heinrich, positioned in the turret, guided the tank's movements while simultaneously monitoring engine temperature and track integrity. With the main gun operational again, though with lingering mechanical vulnerabilities, he had to make a choice: engage immediately or risk losing the high ground. The Tiger fired, the recoil reverberating through its patched armour, knocking out one T-34 before the others could respond. Yet, the battle was far from over. The Soviet tanks returned fire, artillery shells streaking through the morning sky, and debris rained down around the tank. Each impact was a reminder of the fragility of the machine and the lives inside it. Heinrich's ingenuity shone brightest during these tense moments. When the main gun jammed mid-battle, he didn't panic. He quickly climbed out of the turret, crawled under sections of the tank, and freed the breach using nothing more than improvised tools. Meanwhile, the crew kept the tank moving, weaving between rubble and shell craters, buying precious minutes. Soldiers later recalled the scene as surreal. One man, a teacher, calmly performing a mechanical procedure under a storm of gunfire, turning what seemed like inevitable defeat into a temporary triumph. Every decision, every adjustment, every improvisation mattered. A single miscalculation could spell disaster for both the tank and the men inside. As the hours dragged on, the Tiger's presence began to change the dynamic of the battle. German infantry, exhausted and on the brink of collapse, were emboldened by the tank's support. Soviet units, cautious of the Tiger's reputation and unexpected mobility, had to adjust their tactics. Heinrich's understanding of the tank's limitations and strengths allowed him to exploit gaps in enemy formations, maneuvering the massive machine in ways that a conventional soldier might have deemed impossible. He found creative angles for firing, used the damaged terrain to his advantage, and even employed psychological warfare. The sight and sound of the Tiger moving against the odds unnerved enemy troops, slowing their advance and giving the defenders critical breathing room. Yet, the danger was relentless. Fuel and ammunition ran low, and each additional hour on the battlefield increased the risk of catastrophic mechanical failure. Heinrich had to make tough decisions: which systems to prioritize, which repairs could wait, and how to maximize the tank's effectiveness without overextending its patched systems. Every choice carried weight, not only for the survival of the machine, but also for the lives of the crew and the soldiers depending on them. It was a delicate balancing act between bravery and pragmatism, guided by intellect and experience that had little to do with conventional military training. Then came the moment of truth. A concentrated Soviet assault brought multiple enemy tanks and infantry units directly toward the Tiger's position. Heinrich, understanding the stakes, guided the tank into a narrow street lined with rubble, creating a choke point that neutralized the numerical advantage of the attackers. The Tiger's main gun roared to life, taking out one enemy tank after another, while the repaired tracks and reinforced suspension allowed it to maneuver in spaces most would have considered impossible. The crew, following Heinrich's precise instructions, worked as a seamless unit, coordinating fire, movement, and repairs on the fly. In those critical minutes, the difference between survival and destruction lay entirely in their combined skill, courage, and ingenuity. But the battle exacted a heavy toll. Shrapnel tore through parts of the armor, the engine coughed under the strain, and the tank's electrical systems began failing intermittently. Each repair Heinrich conducted under fire became more dangerous, more urgent, and more necessary. At one point, a shell lodged dangerously close to the fuel compartment, threatening to ignite the tank instantly. Heinrich, undeterred, climbed onto the turret in full view of enemy positions, removing debris and securing temporary shields using scrap metal. His actions, a mixture of audacity and careful calculation, epitomized the extraordinary risks he was willing to take to keep the Tiger alive. When the dust finally settled, the repaired Tiger had survived the day. Several Soviet tanks had been destroyed or disabled, the infantry temporarily stalled, and the German defenders had gained a crucial reprieve. Heinrich, covered in soot and grime, climbed down from the turret, exhausted but resolute. The crew looked at him with a mix of awe and disbelief. A teacher, a man who had spent his life imparting knowledge rather than taking lives, had guided a tank through impossible odds and emerged victorious, at least for a fleeting moment. The victory was tactical, not strategic. The war itself would soon end. But in those final, desperate hours, Heinrich Müller had achieved something extraordinary. He had breathed life back into a machine deemed lost, turning it into a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and human courage. In the aftermath, historians and tank enthusiasts alike have marveled at the story. It's not just a tale of mechanical skill, but of extraordinary adaptability. The fact that a man with no formal combat training could repair one of the most complex weapons of the war, under conditions of extreme danger, highlights the remarkable potential of human intellect and determination. Heinrich's actions demonstrate that heroism does not always come in the form of battlefield charges or dramatic duels. Sometimes it is quiet, calculated, and utterly relentless. It is the courage to act when failure seems inevitable, the ingenuity to turn disaster into opportunity, and the calm under pressure that defines true extraordinary achievement. As the war finally drew to a close, Heinrich Müller returned, to a life far removed from the destruction he had witnessed. The Tiger tank he had saved would eventually be abandoned or captured as the front collapsed and Germany surrendered. Yet, the story remained, whispered among soldiers, preserved in reports, and later documented by historians. It serves as a timeless reminder that even in the darkest moments of history, ordinary people can perform extraordinary feats, and intellect, courage, and ingenuity can sometimes achieve what brute force alone cannot. Heinrich's tale of repairing the destroyed Tiger tank in the final battle stands as a testament to the indomitable human spirit, a story of resilience, resourcefulness, and hope against overwhelming odds. And so, as we reflect on this incredible episode from the final days of the Second World War, we are reminded that history is not just shaped by generals, strategies, and battles, but by the unexpected heroes, the teacher who became a mechanic, the man who turned knowledge into the potential, survival, the individual whose courage and ingenuity left an indelible mark on one of the most iconic machines of war. In the crumbling streets, amidst the smoke and rubble, Heinrich Müller proved that even when the world seems lost, human determination can breathe life into the seemingly impossible, leaving behind a story that continues to inspire awe and admiration to this very day.